Here's a fun fact about the Quebec Liberal Party caucus. Pretty old. If they head to the polls in 2022 with the same roster, about a third of them would be over 65. Now, I'm not an ageist. Doesn't matter what age you are, you can still run. But it does show you some of the challenges ahead for the Quebec Liberal Party. And there's a report out this week by the Canadian Press that many of them are thinking about an exit of politics. Well, with more on this, let's go to a spring chicken in the Liberal Party. It's their leader, Dominique Anglade. Madame Anglade, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I thank you, and I hope you did the same thing with the other parties
Yeah.
to measure the average age of all parties.
It's a very good point, right? It's a very
Yes,
good point.
it's a very good point because if you know how old François Legault is and how old the other MNAs are and all the ministers are. I mean, I think we need to compare apples to apples.
Of course, but let's compare the differences here, and that is your party clearly is in a state of reinvigoration, reinventing the party, and I think it says a lot. You're the leader of the Quebec Liberal Party, right? So with with that in mind, does this present itself maybe an opportunity for the future of the Quebec Liberal Party?
Well, I think we need to build. One of the things that I'm really happy about with what we're doing with the party right now is that I've been reconnecting with previous MNAs and a younger generation. And I think the actual force, the actual strength of the party is really the fact that we have people from of all ages. We have MNAs that are extremely efficient, that are 33, 34, 35, but we also have people like David Birnbaum or Carlos Leitao or people that have experience but that's not been MNAs for a long time. We have a variety of people within our caucus, and I think this is really our strength. So I would be happy for people to stay on board. Remember that we have to present 125 MNAs in the next election, and we're currently 28. So there is a lot of room to grow.
So what's the status of your challenge at rebuilding the Liberal Party, right? What's the status there? You had been talking obviously before the pandemic of going out and traveling Quebec. Obviously, much of that has been set aside. You're continuing in a virtual fashion. But what's the status of that campaign?
So there is definitely the whole vision of a progressive, modern party, progressive and modern vision about the economy that has to be sustainable, that has to be inclusive. And right now what we're doing is we are actually touring the different regions, but we are doing it virtually. But remember that I was touring the regions before COVID, but also years before that as minister, but also as a person involved in the private sector. So I've been doing this for years. And we are relaunching again the Charter of Regions, and we're going to be again in the region starting in January.
We're with Dominique Anglade. She's leader of the Quebec Liberal Party. A reminder, we're actually going to be hearing from the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, in a few moments. He's expected to be announcing some things when it comes to vaccines and COVID-19, so stay tuned for that. Dominique, I need to ask you about the precarious state of the French language in Quebec and the going back and forth on that issue. It seems like the Quebec Liberal Party is in a bit of a tight spot here because, you've got the hardliners in the PQ. You've got hardliners, of course, amongst the current government and Simon Jolin Barrette, who's in charge of the language dossier. And it seems like any type of deviation from if the French language is in a dire position, it's close to dying, we have to do something, is looked at in a wrong way in Quebec, particularly in the regions. How are you tackling that issue?
Well, I think we have to be really honest about the facts. The reality is there are things that we can do to improve the French language. There are things that we can do and do it in an inclusive way. And an example of that is the bill that was tabled by Greg Kelly in order to support more services for people that actually want to learn French and make sure that those services are free. So I think there is a way to approach a French language that is not in confrontation, and that's why I don't like the approach from Simon Jolin Barrette, because it's always in a confrontational way that we do this instead of building momentum, doing it in an inclusive way. French is important. Everybody knows that in Quebec. How do we make sure that we propose new ideas for the French language and in an inclusive way. These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves.
So, Madame Anglade, how do you do that without it being twisted by, let's say, certain media outlets in Quebec that are very nationalist, that you're weak on language?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that you can fix like the media approach that there is, right? I think you have to stand by what your own principles are and defend your own principles. I'll give you an example. There was a motion this week about the French language, and we said, we're fine with the motion. Can we just include as an amendment that it's going to be done in a way that it's inclusive, that recognizes the English minority, etc. So they accepted the amendment and they said, okay, we're going to do this. The role of the Liberal Party is a role like that we have to play around inclusion, and if we want to build a modern Quebec that is inclusive, that is sustainable, it's only the Liberal Party that can do this in Quebec.
What are your thoughts on how the CAQ government is handling COVID-19 right now, and in particular, the plans for December, the plans for the holidays?
Well, the whole week has been a week of confusion around the messages that Premier Legault sent. They were obviously not prepared when they announced it. He wanted to say to people, we're going to be able to celebrate celebrate Christmas and celebrate the holidays at least. But the reality was not prepared at all, and there's absolutely no measure in place in order to control the pandemic, or additional measures in order to counteract the fact that there is an increase in socialization. Socialization will increase the number of cases. So they need to provide a plan that is clear. They don't have a clear plan. And that's what we're seeing, confusion again, and again, a lack of transparency from the government.
So would you play this a little bit tougher? Would you go, Ontario, they've got lockdowns in a lot of places. Is that what you're saying here?
I'm not saying that you have to be tougher. I'm saying that you have to be clearer and that you have to execute. A good example of that, there's 1.2 million rapid tests available in Quebec today that are sleeping in a parking lot. Nobody is using them. It is totally unacceptable. In Ontario, they've been using their rapid tests. We haven't been using ours. Why are we doing this? Why are we not?
What's your gut say on that? What's the why? Why do you think we're sleeping
They're waiting on that? They're always late in addressing the situation. They take decisions that are way too late. It's the same thing with the way they want to clean the air in the schools. It's always late. It's the same thing with school boards. We were talking with the office of the premier last week, saying this doesn't make any sense to hold the English school board elections. Oh, it's not an issue. We're going to be able to do it. That's really not problematic. There's no issue. I mean, seriously. So this decision should have been taken like weeks ago. They always wait till the last minute to make decisions, and then they have to deal with the situation that is not a positive one.
Dominique Anglade is leader of the Quebec Liberal Party. Madame Anglade, bonne fin de semaine. Thanks for coming on the show.
Bonne fin de semaine. Thank you.